I stopped the Rite in the middle of a sentence. Not because I was afraid, because the thing kneeling across from me had just told the truth, and I understood, in the space of one breath, that the truth was the weapon. The Latin was still on my lips. The holy water was still wet on the floor. And I closed the book. I have thought about that decision for years. People imagine an exorcism as a contest of volume, the priest shouting, the demon roaring, the furniture moving. Most of it is not that. Most of it is silence and patience, and the slow work of refusing to be led. The danger is rarely the strength in the room. The danger is the cleverness. And on that afternoon, the cleverness reached for a fact, an ordinary, verifiable human fact about one of the people present, and it spoke that fact aloud in a voice that did not belong to the man whose throat it used. I will tell you what was said. I will tell you why I halted everything. But you have to understand the room first, because the lesson lives in the room, not in the headline. A composite, then. I will not give you a name or a city or a date that could undo someone's privacy or their healing. What I describe is stitched together from cases that are real, the details rearranged, so that no living person is exposed, the pattern kept honest. The Church asks this discretion of us, and the discretion is itself part of the teaching. The enemy wants attention. We do not give it the courtesy. Let me say plainly who is speaking. I am a priest. I have offered the sacraments for 40 years. I studied philosophy in the line of Thomas Aquinas, which is to say I was trained to distrust my own enthusiasm and to ask what a thing actually is before deciding what to do about it. For a portion of those years, I have held the faculty to perform the Church's rite of exorcism, which is not a thing a man volunteers for, and not a thing he should want. You do it because a bishop asks, and because someone is suffering, and because the alternative is to leave a soul without the help the Church alone can give. I tell you my background not to impress you. I tell you so you understand that when I closed the book that day, it was not panic. It was 40 years deciding in a single moment that the next word out of my mouth could harm the very people I was there to protect. The room was a borrowed one. They usually are. A chapel attached to a religious house, plain. A crucifix on the wall older than anyone present. A small window that let in a gray afternoon light. We do not do this work in basements with candles. We do it in consecrated places, with witnesses, with a physician's clearance already in hand, because the first rule the Roman ritual gives you is that you must be morally certain you are not dealing with illness, with fraud, with a mind that needs a doctor rather than a priest. Most of what people bring to us is not demonic. I want that on the record before I say anything else. Most of it is grief, or sickness, or the ordinary darkness of a hard life. The Church investigates before she prays this prayer, and she investigates because she takes both the soul and the truth seriously. This case had passed that threshold. The evaluations were done. The pattern was the kind that does not yield to medicine, and there were things present that have no natural explanation, the markers the manuals describe, and that I will describe to you now, because the sensory facts of that afternoon are the reason the rest of it matters. I had come to it carefully, the way you are supposed to. There had been weeks of preparation before anyone knelt in that chapel, conversations with the family, a reading of the history, the required medical and psychological evaluations, which exist precisely so that we do not pray this prayer over a man who needs lithium or a woman who needs grief counseling. And then the spiritual preparation, which the books do not always emphasize, but which any honest exorcist will tell you is the larger half. Fasting. Confession, my own, the day before, because a priest who would expel a demon had better not be carrying unrepented sin into the room, since the enemy reads that the way a shark reads blood. The Mass said that morning for the intention. The Blessed Sacrament reserved nearby. You do not walk into that work cold. You walk in covered, or you do not walk in at all. There were witnesses, as the ritual requires. You never do this alone. There was a younger priest with me, learning, and there were 2 others present whose role was to pray and to assist and, if it came to it, to help with the body. I mention them because they matter to what happened. The Church does not send a man into that room by himself, partly for the practical reasons, and partly because the work is meant to be the prayer of the Church, plural, corporate, not the heroics of one ambitious cleric. The demon, as you will see, understood very well that there were several hearts in that room, and not only mine, and it went looking among them for the softest one. The first thing was the smell. People never expect that. There is sometimes an odor that arrives before anything else does. Not the smell of an unwashed body. Something underneath that. Sweetish and wrong, the way meat is wrong. And it comes and goes as if it is being turned on and off. It was in that chapel before we began. The second thing was the eyes. When the manifestation came, the eyes went flat. That is the only word I have ever found for it. The light that lives in a human face, the thing that tells you a person is home behind their own eyes, it withdrew, and what looked back was patient and old and entirely without warmth. I have looked into those flat eyes more times than I would wish on anyone, and they are always the same, across every case, as if the same intelligence is wearing different faces. The third thing was the voice. It came up from low in the chest, slower than human speech, with a cadence that did not match the man's own way of speaking, and it carried an antiquity in it, a sense that whatever was using those vocal cords had been speaking since long before that man was born. And the strength, I should mention the strength, because people fixate on it and it is the least interesting part. Restraint is sometimes necessary, gently, with charity, never with cruelty, and the body in front of you can become difficult to manage in a way that does not match its frame. But the strength is a distraction. The demon would love for you to spend the whole rite worried about the body. The body is not the battlefield. The will is. The strength is theater, and the theater is meant to pull your attention away from the only thing that matters, which is the slow, lawyerly, relentless intelligence that is testing you for an opening. There were the other signs as well, the ones the manuals list, and that I had learned long ago not to be impressed by, because being impressed is itself a kind of opening. An aversion to the sacred that went beyond dislike, a recoiling from the holy water and the crucifix that was physical and involuntary, the way you would flinch from a flame. A change in the temperature of the room that I have never been able to explain and have stopped trying to. And the cold competence of it, the sense that this was not the first exorcism it had endured, that it had sat across from priests before and watched some of them fail, and that it was sizing me up against all of them. A demon has nothing but time. It does not tire as a man tires. It can wait out your patience, your concentration, your strength, and it intends to. The temptation, always, is to hurry, to force a resolution, to make something happen. The curé d'Ars, who was harassed by the enemy for years in his little rectory at Ars, learned to treat the disturbances almost with boredom, naming the tormentor a grappin, a thing to be ignored while he went on hearing confessions. There is wisdom in that boredom. The enemy is starved by indifference and fed by attention. So I gave it none, and I waited, and I prayed the prayer the church gave me, and I watched the eyes. So we began. The ritual is not improvised. It is the prayer the church gives, the rite set down in 1614 and carried forward. The same psalms, the same commands, the same invocation of St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. You do not freelance. The words are not yours, and the authority is not yours. You are borrowing the authority of the church, which is the authority of Christ, and the moment you forget that, and begin to think the power is in you, you have already lost the discipline that keeps everyone in that room safe. I held the stole. I held the crucifix. I read the prayers as they are written, and I watched. Here is the part that the popular imagination gets entirely wrong, and it is the part that this whole account turns on. A demon will talk to you. It will answer questions you did not ask. It will offer information, freely, helpfully, as if it wants to assist. And the new exorcist, the unformed one, the one who has watched too many films, thinks this is progress. He thinks he is interrogating it. He is not. He is being interrogated. Every word it offers is bait, and the bait is sometimes true, because a lie wrapped around a true thing goes down easier. This is the oldest tactic there is. In the garden, the serpent did not begin with a falsehood. It began with a question, and then with a fact bent slightly out of true. Hath God said? The demonic intelligence has not become less subtle in the millennia since. It has had nothing to do but practice. This is where the theology stops being abstract. The fallen angels did not lose their intelligence when they fell. Aquinas is precise about this, and it is the single most practically necessary thing for an exorcist to understand. An angel is a created intellect, and that intellect is enormous, vastly beyond ours, And the fall corrupted the will, the love, the orientation toward God. But it did not erase the mind. What is across from you in that room is a being that knows more than you do, that reasons faster than you do, that has been studying human beings since there were human beings to study, and that hates you with a cold and total clarity. It is not stupid. It is not an animal. It is a ruined genius. And so the rule the church gives is severe, and it is the rule I live by. You command. You do not converse. You do not ask it questions out of curiosity. You do not bargain. You do not listen to its arguments. You give it the lawful commands the ritual prescribes, and you compel it in the name of Christ, and everything else it says you treat as what it is, an attack delivered in the form of speech. There is a reason the church wrote the rule down, rather than trusting each priest to find it on his own. The rule that you command and do not converse is not a stylistic preference. It is a safeguard built from centuries of hard experience, and it is set into the structure of the Rite itself, the Rite of 1614 and the Revised Rite of 1999 alike. The prayers are imperatives. They do not request. They do not negotiate. They invoke the name of Christ, and they order the unclean spirit to depart. And the form of the words is itself a teaching about who is in authority. The instant an exorcist softens that into a dialogue, the instant he starts asking the thing questions, because he is curious what it might say, he has stepped outside the protection the Rite was built to give him. The church understood that a man alone, improvising, talking back and forth with a ruined angelic intellect, would lose. So she took the improvisation away. She handed him a script and told him to keep to it. The discipline is the armor. The text is the wall. And every exorcist who has been hurt, and some have been, was hurt in the place where he set the text down and began to think he could handle it on his own terms. There are, the manuals will tell you, narrow exceptions. The Rite permits the exorcist to demand certain things of the spirit, its number, whether others are present, by what right it claims a foothold, the sign that will mark its departure, because that information serves the expulsion. But notice the shape of even those questions. They are commands extracting what is needed to drive it out. They are not conversation. They are not the priest entertaining the demon's offer of secrets. The difference between interrogation in service of expulsion and idle dialogue is the difference between a soldier searching a prisoner and a soldier sitting down to chat with him, and the enemy is forever trying to blur the two, because in the blur is where it works. St. Peter wrote that the adversary prowls like a lion, seeking someone to devour. People hear that and picture the roar. But a lion that announces itself does not eat. The dangerous one is silent and patient in circles until you have turned your back. The talking demon is doing the same thing with words. Every sentence is a circle. It is looking for the place where your attention drops, where your pride lifts, where one of the people in the room has a wound it can press. The exorcist's whole job, underneath the prayers, is to deny it that, to keep control of the interaction, to never let it lead, because the moment it leads, it is no longer being expelled. It is being given a stage. Consider how it mixes the truth and the lie, because the proportion is deliberate. A demon that lied about everything would be easy. You could simply discount every word and proceed. The danger is that it does not lie about everything. It tells you 9 true things so that you will believe the 10th, and the 10th is the one that kills. It will speak a fact you can verify, and then another, and your guard lowers a degree, and your fascination rises, and just there, in the place where you have begun to trust the voice, it slides in the falsehood. Or worse, it takes a truth and bends its meaning, the way the serpent did not deny that the fruit existed, but lied about what eating it would do. The lie is rarely a flat untruth. It is usually a true thing, aimed in a false direction. He told the woman she would not surely die, and there was a sense in which that was technically so, and a deeper sense in which it was the most destructive lie ever spoken. That is the craft. That is what you are up against. Not a liar, a master of the half-truth who knows that the most effective poison is mostly clean water. I had been firm. I had kept to the text. It had tried the usual things, the mockery, the false despair, the sudden quiet meant to make you wonder if it had gone, the appeal to pity. None of it had moved me, and I could feel it recalibrating, the way you feel a chess opponent change strategies. And that recalibration is always the moment to be most careful, because it means the easy attacks have failed, and the intelligent one is coming. And then it spoke a name, not a demon's name, a human one. It spoke about one of the people in that room, quietly, almost gently, and it said a thing that was true. A real thing. A private grief that the person carried, a fact from a life, something it had no natural way of knowing, and yet knew, and it laid that fact down in the open air of the chapel in front of the others, as if it were doing nothing more than making conversation. The voice did not shout it. That was the horror of it. It was almost tender. It named the wound, and then it began, very slightly, to turn that true thing toward despair, to use the fact as the first inch of an argument that this person was beyond help, was known, was marked. That is when I stopped. I want to be exact about why, because the why is the entire teaching. I did not stop because what it said shocked me. After 40 years, very little surprises me. I stopped because in that instant I understood 3 things at once. The first was that the truth it had spoken was real, which meant it had access to knowledge it should not have had, which told me precisely what kind of manifestation I was dealing with, and how seriously to take it. The second was that the demon's purpose in speaking that truth was not to inform me. It was to wound the person it named, in front of witnesses, to plant despair in a soul that was already fragile, and to fracture the unity of the people in that room. A true thing, weaponized, aimed at the most vulnerable heart present. And the third thing, the one that closed the book, was that if I continued the rite in that exact configuration, with that person hearing more of this, the harm would land. The prudent thing, the only charitable thing, was to halt, to change what needed changing, and to refuse the demon the audience it had just tried to seize. So I closed the ritual. I did not flee. I did not end the work. I changed it. I had the person it had named taken from the room, gently, with someone to accompany them, removed from the line of fire, because you do not leave a wounded soul kneeling within reach of the thing trying to wound it. I led the remaining witnesses in prayer, plainly, to break the silence the demon had been building toward. And then I returned to the rite, with the room reordered, the vulnerability removed, the demon denied the one target it had spent the whole afternoon searching for. That is what prudence looks like in that room. It does not look like courage in the cinematic sense. It looks like a man recognizing that the prayer is for the good of souls, and that in that one moment continuing the prayer as written would have served the enemy, and so the loving thing, the right thing, was to stop, protect, and resume on different ground. This is the first refusal I will name for you, and I want it stated cleanly. I refuse to tell you the demon won that day. It did not. It was expelled, in time, by the prayer of the church, not by me. But I also refuse the cheap version of this story, in which the priest never falters and every line goes according to a script. The reality is that the work requires you to be willing to break your own momentum, to close the book mid-sentence, when love demands it. The demon was betting that I would keep going, that I would prize the appearance of control over the actual safety of the person it had named. It was wrong. That is the only victory worth having in that room. Not a dramatic one, a prudent one. Now what does any of this have to do with you, who will almost certainly never sit in that chapel? Everything. Because the protection that mattered most that afternoon was not the rite. It was the ordinary things that had been in place long before anyone called a priest. Hear me on this, because it is the part the algorithms and the frightened corners of the internet get exactly backwards. The overwhelming majority of you will never need an exorcist. You will never encounter a full manifestation. The church performs this rite rarely, with enormous caution, on the small number of cases that survive a hard investigation. What you face is not that. What you face is the ordinary erosion, the slow cooling of prayer, the drift, the unconfessed sin that hardens into a habit, the gradual giving away of ground in 100 small, unremarkable surrenders. And the protection against that is not exotic. It is the most ordinary equipment in the church, and that afternoon proved its worth, because the souls in that room who were anchored in it could not be moved by a true thing spoken in the dark. Confession. Begin there. When our Lord breathed on the apostles and said, "Whose sins you forgive are forgiven," he established a sacrament that does something no self-help and no private regret can do. It removes the legal ground. The demonic works through attachment, through the rights we hand it by our own choices, and the confessional is where those rights are revoked. A soul in the state of grace is not an easy target. It is not impossible to harass, but the doors are shut and the keys are not in the enemy's hand. I have watched the difference this makes more clearly in that ministry than anywhere else in my priesthood. The person who is regularly confessed has a floor under them. The truth that was spoken in that chapel could land on a wound, but it could not open a door, because the doors were already closed by grace. The Eucharist, our Lord really present, received worthily, is the strongest medicine there is. Not a symbol, not a memory. Himself, the demonic recoils from him, because he is what it lost, and cannot bear to be near. To receive him is to take the strength of God into your own body, and to make a habit of it, in the state of grace, is to become the kind of soul the enemy circles and cannot enter. Sacramentals, holy water, the blessed medal, the crucifix on the wall, the Saint Benedict medal, with its old prayer against the ancient serpent. These are not magic, and they are not superstition. They are the Church's blessing made tangible, and they work because of what the Church invokes through them, not because of the medal or the water itself. Use them. Bless your home with holy water. Wear the medal. Keep the crucifix where you can see it. That older crucifix in the chapel was not decoration. It was a declaration of whose ground that room was. And the rosary. Our Lady has been given a particular authority over the enemy, and the rosary is the weapon she puts in ordinary hands. It is not complicated, and it does not require a priest, and it can be prayed by anyone, in a kitchen, in a car, at the end of an exhausting day. It is the most underestimated protection the Church offers, because it is so simple that people assume it cannot be powerful. They are wrong. I have rarely met a soul under serious spiritual attack who had been faithfully praying the rosary. The two things do not often coexist. That is the whole architecture of protection. And notice what it is not. It is not a technique. It is not a secret. It is not reserved for the trained. It is the ordinary sacramental life of the Church, available to every baptized soul, and it is precisely this architecture that has been allowed to crumble. Which brings me to the harder question, the one that has kept me up more nights than any single case ever has. Why is this happening more now? Why does it feel as though the enemy has stopped hiding? I will tell you what I have come to believe, and I tell you as the Thomist I was trained to be, which means I will not exaggerate for effect. The enemy has not grown stronger. Its power is what it always was, real and limited, permitted by God and never sovereign. What has changed is us. The infrastructure of spiritual protection in the West has been dismantled, piece by piece, mostly by people who meant well, and a house with its walls taken down should not be surprised when the weather gets in. Begin with formation. For a generation, a great many priests were trained in seminaries that treated the demonic as a metaphor, a primitive way of talking about psychology, an embarrassment to be quietly retired. A man formed that way does not believe there is anything to fight, and a soldier who does not believe in the war does not guard the perimeter. When the manifestations come, and they do come, he has no categories for them, no rite he trusts, no spiritual discipline to bring to bear. The enemy is not troubled by a priest who has been taught it does not exist. It is delighted. Then, the catechesis. 2 generations now have been raised with a thin understanding of their own faith, taught feelings where they should have been taught the faith, given affirmation where they should have been given the sacraments and the reasons for them. A soul that does not know what confession is for will not use it. A soul that was never taught what the Eucharist is will not receive him as he deserves. A soul that thinks the rosary is an old woman's habit will not pick it up. The protections are still there, fully available, but a person cannot reach for a weapon they were never told they had. And the family. The intact family, with the faith lived in it daily, prayer at the table, the sacraments kept, the children catechized by parents who believed, was for centuries the ordinary place where souls were formed and guarded. As that has fractured, the first and most natural line of defense has thinned, and a great many people now arrive at adulthood with no spiritual formation at all, no habits, no anchors, exposed in a way their grandparents simply were not. There is one more thing, and it is harder to say because it sounds like the enemy's own propaganda turned inside out. The dominant culture has spent decades insisting that the demonic does not exist, that it is a relic, a superstition, a stage in human development we have outgrown. And the enemy is perfectly content with that. There is an old observation, and it is true, that the cleverest thing the devil ever managed was to convince the modern mind that he is not there. A man who does not believe in an adversary takes no precautions against it. He leaves the doors open because he does not believe in doors. He dabbles in things he ought not touch. The seance treated as a party game, the occult treated as harmless curiosity, the deliberate opening of a channel he has been assured leads nowhere, and he is genuinely astonished when something comes through. The denial is not protection. The denial is the breach. The grandparents who crossed themselves and kept holy water by the door and would not have gone near certain things understood a danger that their educated descendants had been flattered into forgetting. The enemy did not grow bolder. We grew careless, and carelessness is the only invitation it has ever needed. Here is the second refusal, and I state it as plainly as the first. I refuse to let you walk away from this frightened. Fear is what the enemy trades in, and a fearful Catholic is a more useful target than a faithful one. The point of everything I have told you is not that the darkness is winning. It is not. The point is that the protection is real, it is ordinary, it is within your reach today, and the dismantling I have described can be reversed in your own life this week by simply picking the protections back up. The walls came down by neglect, they go back up by practice. That is not a counsel of despair. It is the most hopeful thing I know, because it means the remedy was never far away. So let me be operational, because faith without works is dead, and a teaching without a task is just a feeling. Here is what to do this week, not someday. This week. Go to confession. If it has been years, go anyway. Especially then. Find the time, walk in, and revoke whatever ground has been given. This is the single most consequential thing you can do, and it is available in almost every parish this week. Receive the Eucharist worthily. Go to Mass. Examine your conscience first. Be in the state of grace, and receive our Lord with the attention he is owed, rather than out of habit. Once this week, receive him as if you believed what he is. Because you do. Get holy water and use it. Most parishes have it freely available. Bless yourself, bless your spouse and your children, bless the doorways of your home. Buy a St. Benedict medal and wear it. Put a crucifix on the wall of the room you live in most. Reclaim the ground physically. Pray the rosary, not eventually, tonight. One set of mysteries, slowly. If you do not know how, learn it this week, because it is simpler than you fear, and it is the weapon Our Lady is waiting to put in your hands. And learn your faith. Find a solid catechism, an honest source, and repair the gap that 2 generations of thin teaching left in you. A soul that knows what it has been given is a soul that can use it. The enemy in that chapel spoke a true thing to do harm. The people who were anchored in the faith could not be moved by it, because they knew the larger truth that framed the small one. Knowledge is armor. Go and put it on. I want to leave you where I began, in that gray afternoon light, with the book closed in my hands and a soul protected, because someone, at the right moment, refused to be led. The demon spoke a true thing, and the truth was meant as a weapon, and it failed because the deeper truth held. I saw that person again, long after, far from any chapel, and free, and unmarked by the thing that had tried to name them as lost. The fact the enemy had spoken was still true. The grief it had pressed on was real. But the despair it had tried to build on that grief never came, because the grief had been carried to the only one who can carry it, into the confessional, to the altar, under the protection of the ordinary means I have spent this whole account commending to you. The wound was real. The lie about the wound did not hold. That is the shape of every victory in this work. The enemy gets the true thing. It never gets the last word about it. The enemy is real, and it is intelligent, and it hates you. That is the sober fact. But it is not sovereign, it is not winning, and it is permitted only what God permits. Athanasius stood nearly alone against the whole world when the whole world was wrong, and he was right, and the world came back to him. The faithful remnant is never as alone as it feels. I do not offer you optimism, which is a feeling that ignores the facts. I offer you hope, which looks the facts full in the face and stands anyway. God is with us. He has always been with us. The question is whether we will be with him. Next time I will tell you about the case where the silence itself was the manifestation, where nothing was said at all for the better part of an hour, and why a demon that refuses to speak is sometimes more dangerous than one that will not stop talking. Until then, go to confession this week. Begin there